You think you understand desire, you think you know what women want. But Napoleon Bonaparte, the man who conquered Europe, discovered something that will shatter everything you believe about attraction, power, and why the greatest men often walk alone. And it starts with a letter, a desperate, pleading letter from an emperor to his wife. Napoleon, the man who made kings tremble, reduced to begging Josephine not to betray him. While he was reshaping the world, she was entertaining other men, the conqueror of nations conquered by loneliness. But here's what Napoleon understood that you don't. It wasn't personal, it was inevitable. Picture this: the most powerful man in Europe, the architect of empires, sitting alone in his tent after another impossible victory, writing love letters to a woman who had already moved on. Not because she didn't understand his greatness, because she understood it perfectly, and it terrified her. You see, Napoleon wasn't just rejected by one woman, he was rejected by the very concept of feminine comfort. And in that rejection, he discovered a truth so uncomfortable, so brutal, that most men spend their entire lives avoiding it. Women don't want great men, they want the idea of great men. But when greatness walks through their door, when it sits at their dinner table, when it shares their bed, they realize something horrifying. Greatness doesn't compromise, it doesn't pause, it doesn't make you the center of its universe. And that's when the fantasy dies. Look around you. Every woman says she wants an ambitious man, a leader, a visionary, someone who takes charge, who builds empires, who refuses to settle for mediocrity. But watch what they actually choose. Watch who they marry. Watch who they stay with when the romance fades and reality hits. It's not the emperor, it's the court jester. Why? Because greatness is not comfortable. Greatness does not text you back immediately. Greatness does not drop everything when you're having a bad day. Greatness does not make you the center of its universe, because greatness already has a center, and it's not you. The man building an empire doesn't have time to manage your emotions. The man changing the world doesn't pause his mission to validate your feelings. The man reaching for immortality cannot be domesticated by routine affection, and that terrifies most women. Not because they're weak, but because they're human, and humans crave safety, predictability, emotional availability, things that great men by definition cannot provide. You see, Napoleon wasn't just a military genius, he was a student of human nature, and what he observed, what he documented in his private moments, was this fundamental contradiction in the human heart. We worship greatness from a distance, but we fear it up close, because greatness is fire, and fire, no matter how beautiful, burns everything it touches, including the hands that try to hold it. Here's what Napoleon learned that you haven't. Women are attracted to the idea of power but repelled by its reality. They want to date the king, but they want him to act like a servant. They want the strength, but not the solitude. They want the vision, but not the sacrifice. And when they realize they can't have one without the other, they choose neither. They choose the man who pretends to be great but is actually just available. The man who talks like a conqueror but thinks like a conquered. You know what a mediocre man offers? Complete availability. His entire identity revolves around her. His decisions are made by committee, with her as the chairman. His dreams are small enough that she can understand them, control them, redirect them. He's not building anything that threatens her position as the center of his world. He's not disappearing into obsession. He's not sacrificing today for a tomorrow only he can see. He's present, manageable, grateful, and that makes him irresistible. Not for what he is, but for what he lacks. He lacks the fire that burns everything it touches. He lacks the vision that makes others feel small. He lacks the terrible burden of knowing he was born for something greater than contentment. Think about it. When was the last time you saw a woman complain about her boyfriend being too available, too agreeable, too willing to drop his plans for hers? Never. Because that's not a bug in the system, that's a feature. The mediocre man's mediocrity is his greatest asset in love. He makes no demands that she cannot meet. He sets no standards that she cannot reach. He creates no competition between his mission and her needs because he has no mission. She is his mission. And while the great man is alone in his study at midnight, crafting something that will outlive him, the mediocre man is on the couch, watching her favorite show, proving his love through his willingness to waste his potential. But here's the deeper truth Napoleon discovered. The mediocre man doesn't just offer availability, he offers something far more seductive, the illusion of control. When a woman chooses a mediocre man, she's not just choosing comfort, she's choosing to be the most important person in someone's life, and that's intoxicating. To be the sun around which another human being orbits, to know that your moods shape his decisions, to feel that your happiness is his greatest achievement. The mediocre man doesn't just give her love, he gives her power. The great man, he offers partnership with greatness. But partnership implies equality, and equality is terrifying when you're not prepared to rise to meet it. Napoleon learned this through blood and betrayal. Every night he spent planning campaigns was a night Josephine spent feeling neglected. Every decision he made for the empire was seen as a decision against their relationship. Every moment of silence while he calculated the future was interpreted as emotional distance. She couldn't understand that his silence wasn't rejection, it was creation. His absence wasn't abandonment, it was ambition. His coldness wasn't cruelty, it was the temperature required to forge greatness from chaos. But understanding requires elevation. And most people, including those who claim to love you, would rather pull you down to their level than rise to yours. Napoleon's letters to Josephine reveal a man torn between two impossible demands. The demand of history, which required him to be more than human, and the demand of love, which required him to remain perfectly human. He wrote to her from battlefields, his words dripping with desperation. "I love you more than it is possible to imagine. You are the constant object of my thoughts." But even as he wrote those words, he was planning his next conquest. Even as he declared his devotion, he was choosing the empire over the woman. Because he had to. Because that's what greatness demands. Total commitment, complete sacrifice. The willingness to be misunderstood by everyone, including those you love most. And Josephine? She took lovers. Not because she was evil, but because she was human. Because she needed presence, not passion. She needed availability, not ambition. She needed a man who could be there, fully there, without the weight of nations on his shoulders. But here's what Napoleon realized in those lonely moments between battles. Josephine's betrayal wasn't about him, it was about her. She couldn't handle being married to a man who belonged to history. She couldn't accept that his first love was his destiny, not her. And so she sought comfort in the arms of men who could give her what Napoleon never could, the promise that she was the most important thing in their world. Not because they were great, but because they were small. Here's what no one tells you about women and great men. The rejection isn't conscious. It's not a calculated decision. It's instinctual, biological, evolutionary. For thousands of years, women have been trained by survival to choose the provider over the prophet. The man who brings home food over the man who brings home visions. The man who protects the tribe over the man who transcends it. And that programming doesn't disappear just because we live in modern times. It goes deeper than logic, deeper than admiration, deeper than what women think they want. A woman can intellectually appreciate greatness. She can be inspired by it, aroused by it, even obsessed with it. But when it comes to building a life, when it comes to feeling safe, when it comes to the daily grind of relationship, she gravitates toward the predictable. Because the great man is not predictable. He's not safe. He's not manageable. He might wake up tomorrow and decide to conquer Russia. He might disappear into his work for months. He might choose his mission over her comfort without a second thought. And that's not a risk most women are willing to take. Not because they're shallow, but because they're smart. They understand that loving a great man means accepting second place in his heart. And most women reasonably want to be first. But Napoleon understood something deeper. The rejection of great men isn't just about comfort or security, it's about identity. When a woman chooses a great man, she's forced to confront her own greatness or lack thereof. She's forced to ask herself, what am I building? What am I becoming? What will I leave behind? And most women, like most people, cannot answer those questions. They've been trained to find their identity in relationships, in being chosen, in being loved. But the great man doesn't offer identity. He offers the terrifying invitation to create one. The mediocre man, on the other hand, offers her the chance to be the great one in the relationship, to be the more ambitious, more driven, more important partner. And that's seductive in a way that true greatness never can be. Here's something Napoleon learned that will change how you see every interaction with women. When you're a great man, when you burn with purpose, when you're consumed by vision, you don't just intimidate women, you exhaust them. Because being around greatness is work. It demands that you rise, it demands that you grow, it demands that you become more than you were yesterday. And most people, including most women, don't want to work that hard in their relationships. They want love to be easy. They want it to be comfortable. They want it to be a refuge from the world, not a preparation for conquering it. But the great man cannot offer that kind of love. His love is challenging, demanding, transformative. Napoleon's love for Josephine wasn't just romantic, it was imperial. He loved her the way he loved France. He wanted to elevate her, to make her worthy of his empire, to transform her into an empress. But she didn't want to be transformed. She wanted to be accepted, and there's the fundamental incompatibility. The great man loves with the intention of elevation. The mediocre man loves with the intention of acceptance. And most women, if they're honest, prefer acceptance to elevation, because elevation is risky. It means you might fail. It means you might discover you're not as great as you pretended to be. It means you might have to face the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. But acceptance? Acceptance is safe. Acceptance says you're perfect as you are. Acceptance asks nothing of you except that you stay the same. Here's the brutal mathematics of greatness. You can have her heart, or you can have the world. Rarely both, because the world demands everything. It demands your nights, your peace, your comfort, your safety. It demands you become more than human. And while you're becoming more than human, she's expecting you to remain perfectly human, available when she needs you, soft when she's afraid, present when she's lonely. But the man reaching for the stars cannot keep his feet planted in domestic soil. This is why Napoleon spoke of women with such calculated distance, not from hatred, but from clarity. He had tried to be both emperor and husband. He had tried to conquer Europe while keeping one woman happy, and he learned what every great man learns. The mission is jealous. It tolerates no rivals. You think you can have both. You think you can build an empire during the day and come home to love at night. But that's not how greatness works. Greatness doesn't clock out. It doesn't take weekends off. It doesn't pause for Valentine's Day or anniversary dinners. Greatness is a fire that burns 24/7. And if you're not feeding it, it dies. And if you are feeding it, everything else starves. This is the choice that breaks most men. They want to be great, but they also want to be loved. They want to leave a legacy, but they also want comfort. They want to transcend humanity, but they also want to remain human. And in trying to have both, they achieve neither. They become mediocre husbands and failed visionaries. They disappoint their wives and betray their calling. They end up in the worst possible position, loved by no one, remembered by no one. But Napoleon chose differently. When forced to choose between Josephine and his destiny, he chose destiny. When forced to choose between comfort and conquest, he chose conquest. And when forced to choose between being loved and being great, he chose greatness. And that choice, as painful as it was, is what made him immortal. But here's what most men miss. When women reject the great man, they're not rejecting his strength. They're rejecting their own reflection in his eyes. Because a truly great man is a mirror. He shows you what you could become if you stopped making excuses. He shows you what you could achieve if you stopped seeking comfort. And that mirror is unbearable for most people. It's easier to love someone who makes you feel better about your limitations than someone who exposes them simply by existing. The mediocre man makes her feel wise, needed, superior. The great man makes her feel small. Not because he diminishes her, but because his very presence is a question. What are you building? What are you becoming? What will you leave behind? And when someone cannot answer those questions, they resent the one who forces them to ask. This is why Napoleon found himself surrounded by sycophants and enemies, but few equals. This is why he could command armies, but couldn't keep a wife. This is why he could reshape Europe, but couldn't reshape one woman's heart to match his vision. The great man doesn't just demand excellence from himself. His very existence demands it from everyone around him. And most people, including those who claim to love him, would rather be comfortable than excellent. But here's the deeper truth. The mirror of greatness doesn't just show you what you could become. It shows you what you've refused to become. It shows you every excuse you've made, every dream you've abandoned, every time you chose comfort over growth. And that's a reflection most people cannot bear to see. Here's the truth that will make you uncomfortable. Most women are not looking for a king. They're looking for a servant who looks like one. They want the appearance of strength without the reality of it. They want the illusion of dating up without the challenge of rising up. The mediocre man provides that illusion perfectly. He has the body of a man, the vocabulary of a man, the confidence of a man. But inside he's soft clay, moulded by her moods, shaped by her needs, directed by her desires. He's not a threat to her comfort, so he's not a threat at all. He won't drag her out of her comfort zone. He won't challenge her to grow. He won't force her to confront her own mediocrity by refusing to embrace his own. And here's the twisted part. She will never truly respect him. She may love him, depend on him, even marry him. But deep down, she knows she didn't choose a king. She chose a subject who agreed to wear a crown. You, the man who burns with purpose, who sees visions others cannot imagine, who would rather die pursuing greatness than live embracing mediocrity, you threaten all of that. You force her to choose between comfort and growth, between safety and adventure, between being loved and being challenged. And most choose comfort, most choose safety, most choose being loved over being transformed. But here's what Napoleon learned in his years of solitude. The woman who chooses mediocrity isn't just choosing a man. She's choosing a life, a small life, a safe life, a life that will be forgotten the moment she dies. And the great man, he's offering her the chance to be part of something immortal, to be part of a legacy that will outlive both of them, to be part of greatness, but that requires courage. And courage, Napoleon learned, is rarer than love. So understand this: you who work while others sleep, you who sacrifice while others indulge, you who see the future while others cling to the present, you were never rejected for your flaws, you were rejected for your fire, because fire is dangerous. Fire cannot be controlled. Fire changes everything it touches. And most people, even those who claim to love you, want to be warmed by your fire, not transformed by it. They want the benefits of your greatness without the cost of your obsession. They want the result without the process. They want the emperor without the empire building. But you cannot separate the man from his mission. You cannot love Napoleon without accepting that he belongs to history first and to you second. This is why the great man walks alone. Not because he chooses solitude, but because solitude chooses him. Not because he's incapable of love, but because his love is bigger than one person. He loves humanity, posterity, the future itself, and that kind of love is cold comfort to a woman who wants to be the centre of a man's universe. Napoleon understood this with painful clarity. His letters reveal a man who loved deeply but chose greatly, who felt the agony of loneliness but accepted it as the price of immortality, who wanted to be understood but settled for being remembered. And in the end, that's the bargain every great man must make. Understanding for immortality, comfort for conquest, love for legacy. Here's what no one tells you about walking the path of greatness. It's not just lonely, it's specifically lonely in a way that cuts to the bone. Because you're not just alone. You're alone while surrounded by people who could join you but choose not to. Napoleon felt this every day. Surrounded by courtiers, generals, advisors, but fundamentally alone in his vision. Married to a woman who shared his bed but not his dreams. Leading a nation that followed his orders but not his inspiration. And the most painful part, he could see the potential in everyone around him. He could see what they could become if they chose greatness over comfort. But he couldn't make that choice for them. He could only watch as they chose mediocrity, one decision at a time. This is the curse of the great man. He sees not just what is, but what could be. And the gap between the two is where he lives, alone. But here's what Napoleon learned in that loneliness. It's not punishment, it's preparation. The man who can stand alone is the man who can stand for something. The man who doesn't need approval is the man who can give it. The man who doesn't need to be understood is the man who can understand. Loneliness, for the great man, is not the absence of connection. It's the presence of purpose. And purpose, unlike people, will never betray you. Purpose will never leave you. Purpose will never ask you to choose between it and something else. Purpose is the only lover that never disappoints. Napoleon died on the island of St. Helena, abandoned by his empire, betrayed by his allies, forgotten by the woman he once begged to love him. but his name is carved into the stones of history. His ideas shaped nations. His ambition changed the world. The mediocre men of his era died surrounded by family, loved by wives, mourned by children, but their names are dust. Their lives are footnotes. Their comfort brought them nothing but obscurity. Which death would you choose? Which life would you live? Because that's the choice. That's always been the choice. Love or legacy, comfort or conquest, being understood by one person or being remembered by millions. The great man chooses legacy, and he pays the price in loneliness. But he pays it willingly because he knows something the mediocre man will never understand. Some things are worth more than being loved. You may never have a woman who truly understands your fire. You may never find someone who chooses your mission over her comfort. You may walk this path alone, misunderstood, unappreciated. But remember this: Napoleon's empire fell, but his legend endures. His marriage failed, but his name is immortal. He lost the woman, but he won eternity. And when you're alone at midnight, building something that will outlive you, remember that you're in good company. Every great man who ever lived walked this path. Every legend who ever lived paid this price. The question isn't whether you'll be lonely. The question is whether you'll be great. Choose wisely, choose once, and then burn everything down to build something that will never die. Because in the end, that's all any of us really have. The choice between comfort and conquest, between love and legacy, between being forgotten and being immortal. What will you choose? And if you choose greatness, if you choose the fire over the warmth, if you choose immortality over intimacy, remember this: you're not alone in your loneliness, you're alone in your greatness, and that makes all the difference. If this truth shattered your illusions about love and greatness, don't let it die in silence. Share it with someone who needs to choose. Save it for the moments when you're tempted to choose comfort over conquest. Because the world needs more legends, even if it doesn't want to love them, even if it doesn't deserve them. Like this video if it forced you to confront yourself. Subscribe if you're ready to walk the path of greatness alone. Because that's where you'll find the truth that changes everything. And remember, you were never meant to be comfortable. You were meant to be great.